It could very well be that you don't even recognize a heavy burden that you carry. And this heavy burden that I'm talking about today is the grief of a connection that never happened. A connection between an important person in your life, a parent. In my case, it was my mom. If this is your first time here, welcome to No Longer a People Pleaser. My name is Tina Rose, and I have been summoned to change the trajectory of your life by sharing mine. And this is another piece of it. I carried that grief of never having a connection with my mom for decades. I carried it for decades. For a long time, later into my adulthood, I knew intellectually that a disconnection happened, but I was so accustomed to ignoring it or thinking, because I recognize it now, I can make a point to connect with her. Therefore, everything is fine. That's what I thought at that time. But that wasn't what was really going on underground, so to speak, in my underground world. I was so accustomed to ignoring it. It was a heavy underlying current in my life. When a deep feeling has been there since childhood, the nervous system doesn't label it as pain anymore. It becomes your baseline, so to speak. Instead of thinking, I feel grief, you're feeling, this is just how life feels. I should be fine. Why does a part of me feel empty? You're not relating it to the grief of a disconnection. You're not relating it to the grief of never having connected necessarily. I didn't. It has developed into not feeling safe in connection. This is how not being able to open up, ways of how the grief shows up in your daily routine, but you're not relating it to the grief of never having a connection. How you interpret in your daily interactions emotional distance, how you interpret silence or rejection. For me, it was all, I am not worthy. That underlying current, that baseline, everything was my fault. And that all was a direct or an indirect result of that lack of connection with my mom. When I didn't receive deep emotional connection with my mom, I normalized emotional distance. I normalized the need to be overly reliant on myself and not interdependent in a healthy way. I adapted, but I did not feel the grief. And a key part of that grief and the emotional distance became normalized in my life and yours, if that is the case for you, is because there was never any clear before or after. It was never fully there. Connection was never fully there to begin with. So, how could it be lost? This created a different way of experiencing what had happened and what was happening. It became, for me, it became more of a longing and a searching as I moved into adulthood, always searching for how to be happy, how to be, how to fit in, how to be a better person. That was always my goal early on, to be a better person, but not really having that direct feeling of why. Why was I longing and searching? And it wasn't until I slowed down decades into adulthood in my 50s. My external life, my external experiences, my external relationships were starting to unravel and fall apart. And forced me to slow down enough to where I was able to begin to see this undercurrent of needing to change the way I was doing things. Everything as I had known it, the grief, the inability to connect, not feeling safe in relationship, on and on, all the things that developed from childhood trauma had become normalized in my world because my nervous system, even as a young child, had to adapt to all of these things in order to survive my life, my situation. It was normalized, but it was never natural. And that's why things at some point in all of our lives, if we are people pleasers and we are ignoring what we feel and what we need, at some point in our lives, it has to be looked at. I got to a point where I could not function the way I had been functioning for almost 5 decades. Even though I had done all the workshops, read all the books, and put it into practice. I didn't just read, I would take action, very divine masculine, to do all the things, or most of the things that the book said to do. Took public speaking classes, trying to find my voice. It all came down to needing to slow down and stop filling my life with distractions on how to be a better person, on how to be happy, go out and do this with these people, go over there on vacation, all the distractions that kept me from recognizing what really needed to be healed underneath all of that struggling. Our early lack and absence of an emotional connection of relationship shaped our people pleasing patterns. That trauma made us, put us in a position where we had to adapt to it so that we could survive it. We did the best that we knew. But now, as an adult, It's time to change our ways so that your light can shine. You still have a capacity for deep connection, but you don't want to force a fix. You don't want to force yourself into trying to look at it. Your guides know what you need. So ask your guides. If you are here and you feel like this resonates, but you don't necessarily reach out to your spirit guides, whatever it is that you reach out to, praying to God, Jesus, your angel, your guardian angel, ask and pray for the help to heal from your deep wounds, heal from the grief that you feel like went away because you know intellectually that there was a disconnection, and you think just because you know intellectually that that's pretty much it, and you know intellectually that you've forgiven, blah, blah, blah. It goes deeper. That pain, that grief is stored in your body. Ask for help and trust that you are being looked after. Trust that everything is going to happen in divine time. Once you set your intention to heal the grief, then God, your guides, will put it in your path. Your higher self will put it in your path. And slowly you will look at it, feel it, recognize it, and release it. And couple this with continuing to stay in a slowed down lifestyle. When you slow down, you remove a lot of the distractions to gently move into awareness of it all. And it begins to process as it did for me. Let me say this. What happened was once I set my intention and I recognized that there was grief there, unprocessed grief that I had normalized and that it was not natural. I need to heal this. And I asked for help. I prayed for help with that. It was at that point when I first started trying to allow that grief to move up. It manifested itself physically through respiratory infections and ailments like that, because even in Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, they say that grief is held in the body, around the chest, in the lungs. So I started having, once I set that intention and I started, my body started that process of healing. That early healing was actually manifest as a physical ailment of respiratory infection for me. And healing for everyone is always a process. Always. It might look different in your physical experiences, but healing for everyone is a process of allowing the feeling, acknowledging the feeling, allowing it to move up and out to be released. And it is just a process that has to be allowed in order for you to heal. And this invisible grief manifests in your daily life, in your daily relationships, as you or me, as us, over functioning in relationships. We've normalized all that grief and adapted by over functioning in our relationships. Examples are always being the first one to check in. And late into my healing in the last 10 years, I would start seeing this. And I said, not in a malicious way or a spiteful way, but I would start saying to myself, I wonder if I don't check in, if that person would ever check in. Am I trying too hard? Am I forcing a friendship that if I just left it alone would die out, or would that person, keep it going? And rude awakening, a lot of them didn't. So that was a big lesson for me. Another way of how we overfunction from a normalized underlying grief that hasn't been healed yet is keeping conversations going. We're trying too hard again to keep that connection, smoothing over tense moments, right? Trying to make the other person feel comfortable. And in actuality, it's not a problem for somebody to be disappointed. It's just us being afraid of the rejection that might come from their disappointment. We lower our expectation and our boundaries to hold on to relationships, to hold on to what we think is a good connection. We feel it's safer not to need too much. That way we can hold on to that connection and not be rejected. Feeling like you don't fit in, that was a huge one for me. All of these were, but I think a lot of us do feel like we don't fit in. And that is not fitting in is the echo of an unmet bond, an unmet connection or need for connection. And I would be drawn to the other person in the room that was quiet. Like if I'm at a party or at a work meeting or whatever, I would often try to latch on to the other person in the room that was quiet. It was like that emotional distance felt familiar and safe to me when I sensed them being quiet and emotionally distanced. That felt familiar, which was a safety for me. To heal, you want to move away from normal. That's what a big part of society is getting lost in, is the things that we feel are normal, but they're not natural. Natural is where the healing is. Natural is where the real joy and happiness is. And you want to move away from being normal, move away from what feels normal by recognizing it in your daily routines. When you feel unseen, ask yourself, am I allowing myself to be seen? Maybe that's the underlying way to change that, to find a new way of being. You feel unseen and you go inward and say, what am I doing to block being seen. And I've done these, I've tried these, and it worked. I was in a relationship at one time. I was managing or facilitating and organizing a big fundraising event for one of the biggest fundraisers in that area for autism. My daughter went to a private school for autism, and I helped operate that school. And I was closely managing daily operations and things like that. I was involved on a daily basis. I was working closely with another parent, and I wondered why. Why do I feel like I'm being rejected by her? Because I was trying to be genuine about my views on what I felt should happen, but there was a disconnect there. And I don't know, we were butting heads. And she wasn't comfortable with me or my position on things, whatever the case. But at that time, I asked myself, I went inward and I said, what am I doing that is bringing that person to reject me? Why is that being mirrored back to me? What am I doing? And I saw how I was rejecting myself every time that I would offer my position on something for the event. I feel like it should go this way. There was always that underlying fear of that person not being happy with my idea. And so it's like I was automatically rejecting myself, rejecting my own idea with the mere fact that I was in fear of it not being accepted, my idea. Anyway, that just dropped in, and I thought I'd throw that in. So I was talking about moving away from what feels normal and in the daily routines, and how when you feel unseen, you ask yourself, how am I allowing myself to not be seen? How am I holding myself back from being seen? And when you feel left out or like the misfit in the group, recognize it as old grief. That old grief is rising, seeping up from underground to be processed, felt, acknowledged, and move through it. And a big part of it, the healing, is to love that part of you, especially in that moment. And that is a key. If you consistently do that with every part of you in each moment that has something to heal, love that part of you that needs to heal. Love the pain of it. Accept it. And by love, I mean accept it as this is necessary. This is important. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful part of me. And I'm going to embrace it by going through this healing process, because I ultimately want to love myself. And I do offer a program, just another YouTube video that I shared, the acronym EMBRACE, and it helps walk you through the steps to heal from emotional pain. When that pain starts to rise and seep up, that EMBRACE acronym walks you through that process of acknowledging, feeling, allowing, etc. So if you want to look that up in my list of available videos, I appreciate you being here. And from myself, my higher self, and all my guides. We see you, we honor you, we love you, and we trust you. Talk to you next time.